everyone, and welcome to Book Boop. My name is Rachel, and today I will be doing my May wrap-up. So I'm going to talk about all the books that I read in the month of May. I got through a lot of books in May, and to be honest, some of them feel like I read a lifetime ago. So I'm going to do my very best to try to remember what these books were about and explain them clearly. I've got my trusty notebook here with all my notes, so I'm going to refer to that. I also have my Kindle Fire here that I'm going to use to hold up a few of the books so you can see the cover, so you can track with me while we're going along. But let's go ahead and jump in because I have a lot to cover and I want to keep this snappy for you all. So the very first book that I got through in May was Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo. That is the second book in the Grisha trilogy. If you've never heard of the Grisha trilogy before, it's about this kind of magical land, not necessarily magical, but we've got like this constant war going on between all these different countries, and there are these people that are called Grisha. The Grisha have, I wouldn't say necessarily magical powers, but they have specific abilities. Some of them can fabricate things or control the wind or the water or things like that. And we're following this girl who all of her life, she has lived as an orphan and she works in the army, and then she ends up finding out through a series of circumstances that she is actually a Grisha. She didn't know this, and so she's also a very rare Grisha that has this very rare power, and then she's thrown into this whole Grisha thing. That's the most basic thing I can tell you about it. It's a horrible synopsis, but whatever. This is the second book in the series, and I had kind of heard from a few people that this one was boring out of the three, but I actually enjoyed this one a lot. I was honestly expecting to be bored. I saw a lot of character development to prepare them for the onslaught of the third book, so I felt like there was lots of great character development, which is always good to see. You don't want those stagnant characters. I was seeing kind of a little bit of a love triangle in this one, or quartet, but honestly, I wasn't mad about it. I'm not a huge fan of love triangles, but this one I actually kind of was okay with because I liked all the guys that were in here. And it wasn't like overly in the forefront, so I enjoyed that. It was kind of like a more of a background relationship type thing, which I always enjoy. So it was very like plot focused and plot heavy, which I really love in books. I don't quite understand why people like the Darkling so much. Some people are obsessed with the Darkling, and I just don't see the appeal. Some people are like, oh, the Darkling is just so, oh, he's just, and it just makes him like pant. They just think he's so handsome, and I'm just like, why? He's horrible. Like, he's a horrible person that wants to do horrible things. Why do people like him? Maybe it's the bad boy mentality, I don't know, but he's got a little bit too much bad boy for me to even really care about him that much. I was pleasantly surprised that on my enjoyment of this series, to be honest. It's a little bit of an older series, and you can kind of tell when you read through, you can tell it's got some older tropes in it, which these tropes were probably newer when this first came out. But I've actually really enjoyed it. It hasn't been nearly as angsty as I thought it would be. I thought it was going to be super angsty. So it's been a really, really fun series. So I got through that book, and I gave that 4 out of 5 stars. So I enjoyed it quite a bit, and I had fun reading that one. This next one is one that I was really uncomfortable to read, and I knew I wanted to read it, and I made myself do it. And that is The Nightingale by Kristin. This is an adult historical fiction novel taking place in Nazi-occupied Nazi-occupied France. And we are following sisters. One of them is living in Paris and figuring out how she can jump into the war effort. And then we have the other sister who's living more of an outside village outside of Paris, and just the things that they're facing in Nazi-occupied France and the dangers and about the people that are Jewish and are being taken away to concentration camps. And it is a very, very heavy book. I am not used to reading really heavy material like this, and just really honestly sad and gut-wrenching material. But this was so well written. I can see why there's so much hype about it and why people love it. I had so many conflicting feelings on this book. The story is very compelling, and the characters are so complex and fleshed out. I just thought they were written so well. But honestly, this was not a pleasant experience for me to read. There's a lot of heavy situations and topics, which is to be expected for the context of Nazi-occupied France. I mean, you're not going to go into this thinking there's going to be lots of fun and giggles. It's depressing, and it's difficult. It's hard, but it's a good look at history and what a lot of people faced during this time and being in a Nazi-occupied part of the world. Like, I mean, it's freaking terrifying, to be honest, and it's hard to read. This book truly made me cry, and I knew it would break me. I knew going into this book would break me. Almost everybody that's read this book said, oh, it made me cry, and it did. And I don't really cry in books. I'll kind of feel emotional. I'll get like a little teared up, but this one actually made me sob. Not joking. And I'm really glad that my husband was not home when I read the end of this book, because I sobbed. It was intense. My goodness. I'm glad I read it. I highly recommend it, but I'm not sure if this specific genre is for me. It's not a reading escape for me. So I love to read. I love to read books that are not necessarily just fun, but books that I enjoy. And this book was so well written, and it was such a good story to be told, but it wasn't enjoyable to me because it was hard. Difficult topics, hard things to read, sad. So I struggled with this one. So I ended up giving this also 4 out of 5 stars. Really great book. I'm going to keep a hold of this one for any one of my friends that wants to borrow it. And it's a really good book, but I don't think this type of book is necessarily for me. It's a little bit too hard hitting, if that makes sense. After that kind of like emotional monstrosity on my soul, I decided to jump into something a lot fluffier, but again, something I normally don't read. And that is a YA romance. Nice little fluffy romance here, a contemporary romance called The Unexpected Everything by Morgan Matson. This one is about this girl who always has her life together. Her father is a politician and is hoping to actually, I think, run for president at some point. And she has her summer all planned out. She's got this really, really important internship that she's going to be doing that's going to go towards college credit for like college program. She has just got everything planned out, and then everything explodes in her face, and all of a sudden her summer ends up turning out a lot differently than she originally planned. This book was cute. I was surprised I enjoyed it as much as I did, and it's definitely a light and fluffy story. It felt a little long. This is a chunky sucker. My goodness, this is a really chunky book. And I don't usually, lean towards contemporary books at all, but especially when the one's like this thick, it makes me a little scared. It felt long, but will say that I didn't feel like there was any unnecessary information in it. I don't feel like there's anything that necessarily could have been pulled out. I felt like all of it was good storytelling and good plot points and everything. I don't feel like it needed to be pulled out, but it just did feel long. My main hang up is that it's mainly character focused and not plot focused. There's a lot of focus on the characters and the character development and character growth, and not necessarily very much plot, which I'm not used to. I like my plot. I like things to be plot focused and not necessarily character focused. I've read a few books that are character focused that I've liked. This one was a little bit too character focused heavy for me. I enjoyed the family and the friendship dynamics in this book. I will say that I couldn't quite relate to the type of friendship group they had. It was the kind of thing where it was like 4 or 5 girls that were all best friends and hung out all the time. And I just didn't grow up with that kind of friend group. I'd have like 1, maybe 2 friends or something, but we didn't all really hang out together. I usually hung out with each person separately. I didn't have like this friend group that we were always texting each other. Well, I mean, I didn't have a cell phone when I was a teenager. I'm old. But anyways, I didn't really have like a friend group like that was really tight-knit like that. So that I couldn't quite relate to, but it was really fun to read and to see this friend group that was not just friends, but just honestly family, and they were just always there for each other. It's overall cute, but again, I don't think contemporary romance is really my thing. It was fun. It was a little long for me, but I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. I didn't hate it, but I didn't really love it either. But you know, I had it on my shelf and I needed to read it at some point. So I have finally read a Morgan Matson book. Go me. The next one I read, and let me get the picture pulled up here, was Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo, which is the 3rd and final book in the Grisha trilogy. I've already kind of given you an idea of what the Grisha trilogy is. So I'll just go ahead and let you know what I thought about Ruin and Rising, if you can see that there. Try to keep it from glaring. I truly enjoyed this entire trilogy. There were a lot of surprising moments throughout the series, as well as this 3rd book. I had a very satisfying ending to me, which I really, really appreciated. I'm looking forward to the adaptions of the series that are coming to Netflix. I don't know when. I thought they were going to come this year, but I think they're a little behind on some things, so which makes sense. I'm looking forward to reading some more books that are connected to this series. So if you haven't heard of the Grisha trilogy, maybe you've heard the Six of Crows duology. That is a duology that Leigh Bardugo wrote that takes place in the same world with different characters, and which I'm actually reading right now. And then there's another one called King of Scars that is also connected to this series as well. So there's other books to read within this whole Grishaverse, and I'm excited to jump into them more, but I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars as well. I think I give every single book in this series 4 out of 5 stars. So it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad I read it, and I'm honestly really kind of impressed that I enjoyed it. The next book that I read, I'm not actually going to talk about in this video, and that is Come Tumbling Down by Shauna Maguire. It is the 5th book in the Wayward Children series, and I'm going to do a separate video talking about the Wayward Children series as a whole, because I read all of them within the past few months and thought it would be better just to combine them all into one video just to talk about the Wayward Children series as a whole. So I will let you know what I thought about that book in another video. After that, I read Obsessed by Ted Dekker. This is one I think I'm going to struggle trying to explain the synopsis for this one. But we are following 2 different guys. One of them is a Jew who was originally born in a concentration camp. He doesn't remember it all. And then there's another guy who is a Nazi. He's the son of a Nazi soldier, a guy that was in charge of that same concentration camp. And they are both searching for a treasure called the Stones of David, which I think are supposed to be the stones that David used to slay Goliath. And they both become really overly obsessed about trying to find this treasure. And of course they hate each other and are trying to, well, the Nazi guy's basically just trying to kill him. But they're both trying to find the same thing, and they become really obsessed with it. I really struggled to connect or care about the main character in this book, to be perfectly honest. I understand that he's supposed to make reckless decisions because of his obsession, but he drove me nuts. He's supposed to, and I get the fact, when you're overly obsessed about something, you don't really think things through correctly, and you just try to get at whatever you're trying to get at. And he was just making really dumb decisions, and so I was having a really, really hard time connecting with this character and really honestly caring about him that much, and that makes me sad. I was honestly only interested in the flashback scenes of the concentration camp. So there's portions of this book that jump back and forth between what is considered the present day, which is in the 70s, and then back during the concentration camps in World War II. We're following some people that are in those camps that are connected to the characters that we're following in here in the present day. Those flashback scenes were the only ones I was actually interested in and cared about and found compelling. This is the first time I have ever skimmed or skipped portions of a book before. Some people have said that before, like, oh, I wasn't really into this book, or this scene kind of bored me, so I kind of skimmed it or I skipped it, and I'm always like, how dare you skip portions in a book? What are you? Yeah, I did that in this. I've never done that before. And I did it. And I get why. Because there are parts of this book that took place during the 70s. We were following the main character and he was just making dumb decisions and I just didn't care about him. But I wanted to know what was happening with the characters that were in the concentration camp. So there were whole chapters that I skipped just to get further along in this book, just to kind of get to the end of it, see what happens, see kind of like the mystery wrap up of it, and just to read the portions that I actually found interesting. Ted Dekker, I love ya, but this just wasn't for me. I have read 10 plus Ted Dekker books and I've really enjoyed all of them. This is the first one I've ever read that I did not like. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. Sorry, Ted Dekker. I love you, man, but I just really didn't like this book, to be perfectly honest. All right. Let's move on to some really, well, this next one really isn't that fun, but it was really, really good. And that is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. This is a middle grade, hard-hitting, I would say fantasy book. It has fantasy elements. Maybe it's like magical realism. We're following this boy whose mother has cancer and she's going through the throes of chemotherapy. Things aren't going well. She's declining quickly. And this book is about how this boy is coping with it, and how he's coping with his mother and knowing that his mother probably isn't going to make it. So it's a very, very sad book, but it is so well done. And one of the ways that his manifestation of how he is dealing with his mother's illness is with this monster that basically is made out of a tree. It's like this, it makes me think of like the Ents from Lord of the Rings, but he's not nearly as nice. There was a movie made out of this. I've never seen the movie. I'm afraid to see the movie, to be honest, because it is a sad story. It is. It's so well written. It's so compelling, but it is sad. So I don't know if I really want to see the movie because I cry much easier at movies. This is a very strong representation of grief and facing the declining health of a loved one. It's a short book that said so much. It's well written. It hits home. It feels like a classic. Interested to see about seeing the movie, but afraid it would destroy me. So I ended up giving this one a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this a lot. This is so well done. This is one of those ones I picked up a long time ago and kept putting off reading, but I'm so glad I read it because it was so good, and I'm so glad to have this on my shelf. All right, let's go to the next one. This one looked like so much fun, and I was really excited to read it, and it just piqued my interest so much, and that is The Collector by K.R. Alexander. This is a book that is a middle grade horror book, and as you can see, it's got this super creepy looking doll on the front. It's all about these haunted dolls and this witch that turns kids into dolls, and it's really creepy, and it was really, really fun. This is such a fun, fast, spooky read. To me, I know it's going to sound weird, but to me this was a cozy book because it reminds me so much of my childhood because I grew up reading Mary Downing Hahn and all of her scary books. I still read them to this day and I adore them, but this reminded me so much of those. So it felt like a cozy childhood read to me, which sounds weird saying of a horror book, but it was a lot of fun. There are lots of spooky scenes and lots of creepy dolls. So if dolls creep you out, this one will creep you out. I will definitely read more from this author. I've added a few more of his books to my overall TBR and Goodreads because I really enjoyed this and it was fun. And I think he has some more books actually that are a little bit focused on dolls too. Not necessarily in a series, but just more creepy ghost stories. So I'm all about that. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I had a lot of fun with this one. It was a good time. The next book and final book that I read in May was The Silver Gate by Kristin Bailey. This one was such a surprise. I really enjoyed this one. I kind of bought this one on a whim and just really didn't know too much about it, but it sounded really interesting. So we are following this family who lives in a village where they believe in changelings. They believe that the fairies will steal a child and put a changeling in its place. So a lot of times if there's a child that either has maybe some developmental difficulties or maybe even a child that just acts out of normal, maybe just a really temper tantrum kind of child or something, they think that that kid is a changeling. And a lot of times they will put that child out into the forest and leave it to die. And that's what the villagers wanted this family to do with this little girl that was born. She was born with developmental delays and they wanted her left in the forest. But the mother, she actually pretended, her father took the girl to the woods and her mother saved her. And her mother and the girl are living further away from the village, basically hiding the fact that this girl exists. And a situation happens where her brother and this girl need to go on a journey to try to find a safe place for her because this girl is no longer safe and he's afraid people are going to try to harm her and he wants to take her to a safe place. So they are looking for the Silver Gate, which is where the fairy realm is. And apparently the fairy realm is somewhere this girl can be safe. That was a really kind of twisting synopsis. I'm sorry about that. But this book was so much fun. It was such a pleasant surprise. I loved hearing the special needs representation and how we had portions of the story that were in that character's head. So I really appreciated it. It jumped back and forth in perspective from the brother to the girl, and the girl has some developmental delays, but I really enjoyed being in her head and not just seeing what she was doing, but hearing what she was thinking. And I loved it. I felt like it was such fantastic representation, and I've never seen that before, ever. I'm sure there are some other books out there possibly, but this one was really good. I just loved seeing the perspective of someone who's so unique like that, and I just really enjoyed it and appreciated it. I loved the sibling relationship. It felt very real with the frustrations and the love. There were plenty of times where this brother and sister got so frustrated with each other, just communicating with each other and just understanding each other, but they also loved each other so much. And I loved seeing that. I loved seeing that they loved each other, but they also bickered, they struggled, and I just thought that was done really, really well. It's a wonderful fantasy quest of adventure and opening our eyes to the strengths of others. So I highly recommend this one. This is one I haven't really heard about much at all, so I highly recommend it. It's really good. Oh, and it's a middle grade as well. And it's a fun, quick read. There's one other book out. I think it's just a duology, and I am planning on reading it because I enjoyed it a lot. So those are all the books that I read in May. Those are quite a few. I have been flying through so many books, and it's been making these wrap-ups really hard because I'm struggling to remember all the synopses and everything I thought about them. It's a good thing that I take notes. Oh, The Silvergate. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It was really, really good. What did you read in May? Let me know down below what your favorite book that you read in May is. Let me know if there's any of these books that you've read that I mentioned today and what you thought about them. But thank you so much for watching this video and watching this wrap up. On this side of the video over here is my logo. If you click on that, you can subscribe to my channel, follow me on my book journey. On this side of the video over here is a suggestion for another video if you want to watch another one right now. Thank you so much for watching. You rock, and don't forget to keep reading. Bye.